It's dramatic, it's competitive, and there's a lot of companies that obviously have innovations that are doing something real, but there's a lot, of course, that aren't, and they're faking it till they make it, and it's a little bit of kind of dramatic scene.
Andy Dhanik knows where the bodies are buried, and he's ready to talk. Adtech's got skeletons, and Andy Dhanik has the map. From MFA cockroaches that won't die to AI innovation that's just Excel with better PR, this episode of the Auditing show cuts through the BS. Andy spills on fraud, backroom deals, and why SPO is just another overpriced middleman hustle. If you work in Programmatic and still have some faith in the industry, well, this might change that. Tune in.
Troutman, the czar of the TCPA, isn't just the guy you call when your phone rings too much. He's the guy you must call. Need to navigate the legal minefield of robocalls, texts, and telemarketing nightmares? Troutman doesn't just give you advice. He hands you a roadmap, a compass, and a do not press this button sign. Practical? Yes. Actionable? Absolutely. And if you're not calling him first, let's be honest, you're probably making a mistake.
Welcome to the Doge Show. I'm Paysock Latin, your host, your guide. Now, let's be honest, probably the only thing standing between you and a dozen unread Slack messages. Today we got Andy Dhanik in the hot seat, a guy who's been everywhere in Adtech, from running SSPs, DSPs, and exchanges to calling out the messy truths behind Programmatic. If you ever wonder why your ads end up sites, even that your incognito tab wouldn't confess to, Andy's here to spill the tea. First of all, the hardest question, how are you doing?
It's been a very interesting year in Adtech. Lots of consolidation starting to happen again, so that's kind of exciting to see. Adtech was quiet for a while, and it's great to see that things are starting to heat up again. But otherwise, doing all right. I've been consulting now for the last couple of years. Also launched my own little thing with a couple of buddies at the beginning of this year. So, exciting times ahead.
So we're
gonna see me shine, 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 shine. Walking on beams of light, 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 light. You're gonna see me shine, 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 shine. I can't help myself, no, no. Blue skies, no dark clouds, nothing in my...
So we're going to talk a lot about Programmatic today. It's a behemoth, but it's riddled with inefficiencies, fraud, and questionable practices like rampant MFA made for ad sites. Despite the ecosystem's challenges and advancements in AI and SPO, we know that many companies are not walking the walk. You've said that most of the Programmatic ecosystem is like a reality TV show. Everyone's pretending to be friends while backstabbing each other for impressions. Can you break that down a bit?
Yeah, it's dramatic, it's competitive, and there's a lot of companies that obviously have innovations that are doing something real, but there's a lot, of course, that aren't, and they're faking it till they make it, and it's a little bit of kind of dramatic scene. I guess, a lot of companies right now, especially, are riding this AI wave. And if you look at what most people are doing behind the scenes, there's not a lot of actual innovation. This is just rebranding of machine learning, stuff that we've already had access to over the last, half decade or more, that they've slapped some lipstick on and are rebranding it to vie for attention. There's a lot of that's been going on, and it's continuous. It's just what Adtech is.
So are we talking more Survivor alliances or Desperate Housewives drama?
I guess probably more Desperate Housewives, in my opinion, in my perspective. But then again, I'm also used to working with a different type of clientele. Typically, like your tier 2, tier 3s that maybe are more embroiled in that sort of space than the others.
So the promise of AI and Programmatic does sound like selling jetpacks to commuters, but is AI really changing the game? Or are we just renaming spreadsheets to sound cooler?
A little bit of both. So there's of course practical uses for AI, of course, especially when it comes to audience targeting, curation, dynamic creative, huge there. But of course there's the other side of things, and the dark side of AI. which is truly automating minutia, the boring stuff, reporting and things like that, that typically took up lots of manpower, the tedious tasks that no one wants to do. And, I don't know that there's a lot of brands or companies out there that are promoting AI in that fashion, but it's definitely, it cuts both ways. People are using it for both types.
So you've worked pretty much with every acronym under the sun, from SSPs, DSPs, exchanges.
Yep.
Which one of them is the bigger offender when it comes to the incestuous ecosystem that you just described?
Man, that's a very loaded question. I guess, if I had to put it into perspective, really just the margin-based business that is Adtech, the incentive structure is misaligned.
Right.
Every single player that's margin-based is incentivized to take more and more from either the advertiser or the publisher. And incentives are not aligned. So it's painful for the publisher. It's painful for the brand. You have publishers that are getting squeezed for every single penny. Meanwhile, their content's being stolen and regurgitated by AI, not compensated for it. Then on the flip side, you've got the brands who are also sort of vying for attention of users, and they're being nickel and dimed to death by either the DSPs or the networks that they're buying through, the agencies that they're buying through to reach said consumers. And there's little to no return on ad spend in most scenarios, like at least for the upper funnel campaigns, or the upper and middle funnel campaigns that agencies typically run.
So let's talk a little bit about MFA sites. Are these the cockroaches of ad tech, resilient everywhere and impossible to kill? Or is there a pesticide out there for it?
I think we've all done a pretty damn good job of reducing the damage and exposure to advertisers through MFA. But what's the delineation between your quintessential MFA that we're targeting to eliminate versus any other major publisher, right? Every publisher's site that offers free content in exchange for ads is made for advertising to a certain degree, right? It's just, where do you draw that line? There are certain publishers, and I won't name names, but we're talking household names, that inevitably have worse quality content than a lot of these MFA sites that are being called out and being, flagged by the Jounce medias of the world. So something to consider, especially as we all start to ponder what next year is going to look like. How are we going to do a better job of really defining what's MFA, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable in their practices, and hone in on those tactics to block specifically? I think that's
So SPO gets thrown on like a confetti at an ad tech wedding. Is it just a new dress on the same bloated supply chain? And what does real SPO look like to you?
Real SPO, in my opinion, and this just comes from my background and what I've been doing and what I've had success with over the last few years, is going direct to publisher whenever possible. Direct supply, right. Direct demand. That's the way you drive performance. And ultimately, even buying from an SSP, as I mentioned earlier, the incentives are misaligned. It's margin-based. Squeeze as much margin out of the publisher as possible. It's not conducive to a healthy relationship between supply and demand.
If you could rewrite the entire rulebook for programmatic, what would you put on page 1? And what's the one thing this industry needs to stop doing to stop being its own worst enemy?
That's a really good question. I mean, I guess I'd probably start by figuring out some mandate towards universal transparency. Every single ad dollar should be traceable to its outcome, but also to everyone that's involved in the chain. I think that's super important right now, especially as we're talking about SPO, as you mentioned earlier. This is a very incestuous space, and there's lots of people that are in the middle of every single transaction. You have obviously the publisher, you have the SSP, you have ad quality vendors, you have traffic quality vendors, you have the DSP, you have their various fees that are stacked on top of it, audience curation, so on and so forth. I think it's really important to better illustrate what exactly is happening in between that initial ad request and when that ad gets served. That I don't think people fully understand what's involved in every step towards delivering an impression.
So I want to dive a little bit into the next chapter about creativity and its role in driving performance. And humor me a second here. Why does creative always seem like the unpaid intern in the programmatic campaign?
Super weird. I don't get it myself. I mean, my background, as you know, and we've done interviews in the past, I'm a performance guy. And I got my legs in this business running some of the biggest performance advertising DR campaigns the internet has seen. Creative was always at the forefront. Of course, there's direct publisher connections and contextual targeting and buying endemic sites, like the basics. But creative was always the most powerful component and was often the make or break point of whether these campaigns would work out in the wild. I don't know why there's less emphasis placed on it. Maybe it's by virtue of limited resources on the agency or brand side, not having a deep enough understanding of their audience. It's super strange, and I don't quite get it myself. But one thing I did notice though is that larger holdcos and large brands maybe they're not as scrappy. They don't quite get it as much as the smaller DR guys that are really like printing money, for example, on Instagram feeds or Facebook, like Dr. Squatch, for example. Like, they've got creative down pat. The most successful brands on Instagram, and they're in retail now. They grew. They started from Facebook and Instagram ads, and they grew into a retail presence. And the way they got there was they built really high quality, memorable creative that drove, I guess you could say, engagement and interaction. These were viral content clips. Like, it was pretty incredible what they did. So a lot of these like smaller DR guys get it. Big brands, I don't know. I guess they feel like they don't need to. I don't know what the stigma is there, or what their psyche is.
So you've championed personalized creative in your work. What do you think is the secret sauce for making creatives actually resonate with an audience that is currently being bombarded by ads everywhere?
Well, relevance, for one. Understanding who your audience is, I think, is the first step. And then building creative that resonates not only with the audience, but also the content that they're consuming. So, this goes back to endemic buying. You want to advertise a weight loss product? Well, you might want to do it on a health or a beauty website that has content that's centered around that, right? These are super basic principles, I think, that still are very, very relevant, that obviously are important to pay attention to. And then aside from that, iterating, multivariate testing. A lot of advertisers don't quite understand what multivariate testing is, but figuring out what bits and pieces of copy, color, images, so on and so forth to test, dynamically split test in real time while you're running these buys is super important.
So what's the most hilariously bad creative you've seen work?
Oh, God, dude.
So what was that ugly ads thing? Remember? About 15 years
there's
ago?
a lot of ads. So like, it's funny. It's funny you ask this because, back in the day, I don't know if you remember, but like the one tip for a tiny belly ads. Do you remember that stuff? Like back in
make them ugly and there's just a line.
Yeah, no.
There's text aligned under it, right?
Exactly. It's text and a line underneath it. And it was so bad and it was so crude, but my God, it clicked well. I mean, you're talking like 1% plus CTRs on display, just unheard of in today's time. But no, I've seen a lot of bad ads. But what I've noticed more of is that I see more ads placed incorrectly within content than I see just genuinely bad ads. Right. And that tells me either the brand or agency is not putting enough thought into the audiences, they don't know who their audiences are, or they just simply don't care.
So if you could snap your fingers and force every brand to embrace one creative strategy tomorrow, what would it be? And does it involve banning stock photos of people high-fiving in offices?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, perfect targeting is not going to save uninspiring creative, right? So like the balance is really, really critical. I guess, the messaging, if I were to instill any bit of knowledge in a brand that's looking to drive higher performing creative, get a better understanding who your audience is, and build the creative specifically around what that group of people would likely be interested in. It's not really rocket science, I guess. When you get down to the nitty gritty, depending on the product that you're looking to promote, you really need to figure out how to spotlight that product while also remaining objective and making it look less like an ad. Those are the things that I've always had success with. An ad that looks benign, that looks organic and native to the content that it's serving within generally performs the best.
So let's talk a little about AI. It's the shiny new toy in Adtech, but is it more like a Swiss Army knife or a chainsaw in the wrong hands? How do you see AI shaping or maybe mangling the landscape of media ethics? And more importantly, how scared should we all be?
Well, I mentioned earlier, models are trained, of course, based on content that's available in the open internet. the unethical or the ethics questions still lie within how should a publisher who's publishing and building all of this content be adequately compensated for training these AI models? Of course, because AI won't work without any of it. And then, of course, there's also, it's kind of a double-edged sword. AI can improve relevance and it can help brands and agencies hone in on their audiences. It can also amplify bias and manipulate behavior. So it's kind of important to keep an eye on all of it. And I think a portion of the vigilance that we need to have is that we need to audit data sets regularly and really implement some sort of bias detection algorithm to make sure that AI is doing what it should be doing and providing an unbiased outcome.
It sounds good, but aren't we all just becoming like lab rats in a digital maze? And if we're all lab rats, who holds the cheese?
I mean, the cheese is return on ad spend, right? So yeah, I guess we're all doing something along the same lines as one another when it comes to leveraging AI in ad tech, targeting, creative production, reporting, so on and so forth. I don't know that I don't know that it's a groundbreaking innovation for ad tech quite just yet, but I think it's going to be an essential part of what we do. I think as the space matures and understands its applications, whatnot, I think we'll get better at leveraging it and deploying it.
So generative AI sounds really cool until it's spitting out ads based on your late night Google searches. Are we too close to crossing the creepy line, or have we already sprinted past it?
Well, yes, the creepy line is really informed consent, right? Users should always know how their data is being used and how it's being used to build ads and targeting. I think it can cross into the creepy territory, not if it's being used ethically. I mean, transparency about AI is essential and how brands are using it. We obviously need to prioritize transparency in its design, and that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, in that we really need to understand users. We need to understand how it can be applied to grab their attention without being overly invasive and crossing into that borderline creepy territory.
Am I too paranoid to believe that my smart fridge might be selling me out for ad money?
Absolutely is. I guarantee you it is. You remember not Pied Piper, Silicon Valley?
Right.
Yeah, they had that smart fridge that was listening to them. It's pretty hilarious.
Well, there's someone I just read an article last year about a smart toaster that was showing.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
And the advertiser, of course, didn't want it. They found a way to have them show up on the screen, and we're charging money. Are the same tools creating the mess really the ones to clean it up?
No, it needs to be governed by some sort of third party in order to maintain its accountability. But no, I mean, right now, I don't see a tremendous ethics problem as long as brands and agencies are aware of its capabilities and what we should be implementing as its limitations.
So if you had $1 million and you were going to bet on AI saving the ad tech industry or burning it to the ground, where would you put your chips?
I would say saving it. I'm generally positive about it.
So do you think there's actually a world where AI and ethics live harmoniously in the ad tech ecosystem?
Yeah. I think we're getting there. There's a handful of folks that are spearheading and kind of taking control of lobbying for stricter controls on AI in Congress as it relates to its practical application at tech. So I think we're getting...
briefly spoke about inventory and placement. It's not a glamorous topic, but it is where all the magic happens, or the disasters. Why do so many brands treat it like an afterthought? Isn't that basically like putting a Michelin-starred meal on a paper plate and hoping for a good Yelp review?
Oh, yeah. That's a great analogy, and I don't get it myself. My background has always been buying placement-specific media directly from publishers. And generally speaking, when you're buying placement-specific media that's low in the impression curve, if it's contextually relevant and you have good quality creative, everything just kind of works. I think part of that problem actually is misaligned incentives between brand and agency. Brand is expecting a certain amount of reach. Agency is trying to figure out how to get there. There is, of course, maybe some KPI that's involved in mid and lower funnel, but if they can't hit it, they still have to spend the money. So they oftentimes will just place the media wherever they can get delivery. And that's bad. We all know. This is just what happens. This is the space.
So why are brands chasing the cheap CPMs?
I mean, it's just cheap delivery, right? So it's a chicken before the egg problem. And I think this also comes back to agencies resetting expectations. Guys, you can't get $3 CTV inventory. It doesn't exist. And those expectations need to be set with the advertiser prior to accepting or sending an RFP response, because it gets everyone else into trouble. And we see what we're seeing right now in the open exchange. We have this sort of point of diminishing returns now. Agencies are expecting to get CTV inventory for next to nothing. I mean, CTV inventory specifically is probably the most problematic in the open exchange right now. CPMs are lower than what you would pay for OLV or in-app video right now. And it's arguably a much better delivery means than either of those two platforms. But this is all because there's pressure to cut costs from the agency side, and they're not doing their job of properly selling it to the brands that they work with.
So why is narrow and deep better than shallow and wide?
Well, I mean, it all depends on the KPI, but ultimately, if you're looking for a return on ad spend, if you're looking for some sort of mid or lower funnel outcome, getting directly to that niche audience who's most receptive and is most likely going to take an action on the advertisement that you're presenting to them is the way to go. I mean, you've got to figure out who the audience is. You got to figure out what creative resonates with them, and ultimately, you'll make more money in the long term. Return on ad spend is what everything should be measured on, in my opinion, but it's unfortunately not.
So what are the blind spots that scale creates in performance?
I mean, it's definitely scale sacrifices quality. Obviously, targeted approaches deliver better results, generally speaking.
Is it the fast food of ad tech?
It's definitely the fast food of ad tech. The open exchange, I think, is the fast food of ad tech. The open exchange is where most publishers and SSPs will go to park unsold inventory, and that unsold inventory is easy to access, right? So you got a DSPC, you set up a campaign and just target the open exchange with no whitelist. Doesn't get any easier to deliver.
So if you had to choose between an average creative on premium inventory or killer creative on low quality inventory, what is your pick and why? And is this is this like asking you'd rather eat filet mignon with a plastic fork or instant ramen on fine china?
I think the latter rather than the former. So average creative on premium inventory. So trust is everything, right? So I think generally speaking, you get better quality users. And for brands that are looking to, I guess, make an impact on users specifically as it relates to trust and brand awareness, premium quality inventory is where you're going to park your dollars.
Should we be tattooing context matters on everyone's content decks?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Decks? Sorry. Should we be tattooing context matters on everyone's strategy deck?
Yeah, 100%. Totally.
So if the inventory is the foundation of ad performance, what is the first step that brands need to take to make sure theirs isn't crumbling under them?
Well, I mean, this requires audits of what they've been buying, what has been working, what hasn't been working, and then building lookalikes based off of that. And of course, there's certain providers that'll help you figure out those data sets. So you want to understand types of inventory that are working well. Obviously, you go back to your reporting, you review the inventory that you've been purchasing, and really just copy-paste the ones that are performing well.
Okay, picture this. You're stranded on a desert island, no emails, no dashboards, no LinkedIn posts. What 5 people, tools, or random items are you going to bring to stay sane? And if one of them is not a lifetime supply of coffee, I'm going to judge you.
This is gonna sound terrible. Believe it or not, probably a sat phone or just a sat data device, so I could stay connected. If that.
Okay, so besides that, if you could bring one gadget, what would it be? And it can't be your phone.
Can't be my phone. I mean, I guess you gotta have water, right?
One of those straws, those filter straws.
A life straw. I mean, you gotta have water. I'll find something to eat on the island. I mean, I'm a little known
I got a bunch
fact.
of those life straws in my closet.
Yeah, I mean, they're great.
We're all scouts, that's why.
Well, there you go. Yeah, a little known fact.
So who's the first person you want there to keep things interesting, and who's the last person you'd want to be there?
I mean, does it have to be a person that I'd want there? I'd probably...
Like an animal?
I'd probably say my dog.
Your dog.
Yeah.
Who do you not want to be there? Your brother?
No, I'd love for Ted to be there. No, who would I not want to be there? There's a long list. A really long list. I won't name any names, but there's a long list.
So if you ran a marketing campaign to get rescued, what would your tagline be, and who's your target audience?
A marketing campaign to get rescued. Maybe lost but not
forgotten. We're talking about creative. We got to see this creative now.
Well, lost but not forgotten? Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't actually thought about that.
Would you hashtag it, like save me now?
Yeah, probably save me now. Save,
So what's the one piece of advice you give your island self to avoid losing your mind? Does it involve a volleyball?
no volleyballs, no Wilson here. I mean, you know what? I focus on this every day, and it's probably the same thing that I would use to get through that. Small wins each day. Every day I get 1 or 2% better than the previous day. You know, build, explore, and adapt. That's my credo right now.
And if you bring one meal to the island for eternity, what would it be? And you can't say whatever is on the Adtech menu.
One meal forever? Can it be Mexican food? Any sort of Mexican food. Sign me up.
But you like Tex-Mex or like Mexican from Mexico?
I guess now that I'm in San Diego, Cali burritos are my thing. They weren't my thing before. I hated French fries and burritos. Now I've grown to like it a lot.
What do you think that being stranded on an island would teach you about yourself that Adtech could never teach you?
Resourcefulness, I think. Resourcefulness, resilience. Those are the things that come top of mind. But I guess, both of those things are also applicable when it comes to Adtech too. So
I want to get a little bit into your personal life and your philosophy of life, work. If you had to sum up yourself in one sentence, what would it be? And you can't say innovative leader or I will throw up.
Sum up myself in one sentence. Sum up myself in one sentence. Damn, that's good. I haven't thought about that.
Damn, that's good.
Sum up myself in one sentence, I guess.
So what's the one hill you're willing to die on when it comes to the ad tech industry, and why?
Hill that I guess it would really come down to creative and relevance, honestly. That's something that I've preached forever. And, I still work with a bunch of performance marketers right now. And, that's at the core of the principles of how we buy for them, how we manage their campaigns, and how we deliver on return on ad spend goals. It's always been about creative. It's always been about context.
So do you think we can really clean up the industry, or is this rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic?
No,
I think we can. Titanic, who's playing the violin? That's what I want to know.
I think we can clean it up, and I think we've made a lot of strides in the last few years. Adtech, Sellers JSON, all great things for the industry. Jounce Media also, another great thing for the industry. I think there are going to be actors, of course, that'll manipulate and take advantage of, what we have built right now. And of course, it's a Titanic-sized ship to turn and steer in the right direction, but we're getting there. I think, and generally speaking, I've been in this business forever, so I go through my periods where I'm super jaded and sometimes very optimistic. This last year feels like it's been pretty pivotal, and it seems like we're going in the right direction.
So if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice before you entered this industry, what would it be, and why would it be invest in therapy?
I was just going to say, find a great therapist. No, you know what? I've always...
Run the other way?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've always told my friends who want to get into ad tech, man, you don't want to get into ad tech. But no, honestly, it is actually pretty rewarding. I love what I do. There's not a day that goes by where I don't thank my brother for helping me get in this industry. It's exciting. There's always new stuff going on. A little bit scary at times. It always feels like you have a target on your back, especially if you're working for a tier 2 or tier 3. Everyone's trying to kill you. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And what I love the most about this business is the relationships that I've built over the years, the friendships that I've forged. We've got a little community here in Adtech that I think is irreplaceable. It's hard to find people that you bond with over, trials and tribulation. And, we have done that in Adtech. We've all forged these sort of lifelong relationships through turmoil, and we've gotten better as a result. And I love that. I love that about this business.
So what's one popular idea in Adtech that makes you roll your eyes every time you hear it?
Man, there's a few. I guess the most recently is curation. I mean, I think it's obviously necessary, right? But what is the difference?
Well, yeah, that's what I point out. I've said it's necessary, but it's fixing a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place.
It's fixing a problem that shouldn't exist, but also, why are we talking about curation so much now when, in reality, all of these data vendors that have existed over the last, 10 or so years that have come into the space that have preached audience targeting, that's a form of curation, right? So why are we shifting the burden of responsibility now, all of a sudden? If these third-party targeting vendors on the demand side are so good at what they do, in theory, we wouldn't need to do it on the supply side. That's kind of, and I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad about it. It's just something. It's another buzzword for us to talk about, and it'll probably die by the vine by this time next year.
So let's close this out with juicy stuff. What is something about you that no one would ever guess? Maybe it's a secret talent, a guilty pleasure, or a karaoke go-to song that you absolutely crush.
You know what? As weird as it sounds, I'm kind of a good old boy when it comes down to it. I love camping. I've got a few trucks and Jeeps. I like off-grid camping, off-road.
I see the off-road photo behind you.
Yep, I've got a few rock crawlers. I'm just a car fanatic. I guess there's a lot of other car fanatics that probably exist in Adtech, my brother being one of them, but not so much into exotic cars as much. But yeah, I love camping. I love being on a boat. I like doing the absolute opposite of Adtech.
Well, that's another episode in the books where we once again confirm that Adtech is a beautiful, dysfunctional mess, and somehow we all keep showing up for the ride. Big thanks to Andy Dhanik for peeling back the layers of programmatic nonsense with a level of honesty this industry rarely deserves. And of course, a massive shout out to our sponsors, the real MVPs keeping the lights on so we can continue exposing the absurdity of digital advertising. Troutman Amin. Because in a world where compliance nightmares lurk around every corner, you want lawyers who actually know the difference between legal risk and complete insanity. Daily Motion. Yes, the OG video platform is still here. And no, it's not just French YouTube. If you're not paying attention to their high-quality inventory and brand-safe video solutions, you should be. Rembrandt, the only AI that actually gets branding right. Instead of churning out generic drivel, Rembrandt makes creative that doesn't suck. Imagine that. So to our sponsors, our guests, and everyone who stuck around to the end, thank you. Stay bold, stay curious, and know more than you did yesterday.
Like there's no stopping it.